once again. So our today's TESL Dialogue topic today is understanding gender and sexual diversity. And we are very happy to have among us Celeste Turner. So before going to the main session or question answer session, I would like to read a little bio about Celeste Turner. Celeste Turner is a queer and genderqueer individual who lives and works in the Niagara region in Ontario, working as the LGBTQ2 plus support coordinator for the Niagara Falls Community Health Center and volunteering as a co-chair of the board of directors for OUT Niagara. Celeste is active and dedicated to supporting Niagara's 2S LGBTQIA plus community. Yeah, so this term may sound a little bit bigger for most of the people, so I hope Celeste is going to explain and elaborate it to us today. In 2019, Celeste was the recipient of a YMCA Peace Medal for their efforts to Niagara's sexual and gender diverse community. Congratulations, Celeste Turner from TESL Ontario. We are very proud of you. Celeste enjoys both teaching and practicing yoga, lives with her 130-pound mastiff. So welcome once again to our session, Celeste. So as you know, we have 3 types of activity. First, we have introductory questions, then we have few discussion questions, and at the end, we have breakout room questions. So let us first go to introductory questions. So our first introductory question today is, where did your first impressions of sexually and or gender diverse people come from? So where did your first impressions of sexually and or gender diverse people come from? So over to you, first question, Celeste.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and thanks for having me. And I do have a giant dog, so if you hear barking, I apologize in advance. My first impressions, I will preface and say that I was born in 1993 for context, and in Canada. And so my first impressions were like Ellen DeGeneres coming out very publicly, and then very swiftly losing her sitcom. Getting pulled off TV. I remember Elton John. I think the first trans person ever on my radar was Chaz Bono. So very like outlier in the media. I remember the checkouts at the grocery store, magazines plastered of those folks. So yeah, I'm curious other folks' experiences as well. I'm seeing some in the chat, family, travels, university. Anyone else? Yeah, want to share about that?
Thank you very much for sharing yours. Yes, now floor is yours. Please, dear audience, if you have any experience, feel free to share with us. We have the safe environment in here. You can either unmute yourself or you raise your hand, or if you don't want to do that, you can also put it in the chat, however you feel comfortable. So we have media for sure, Trees Company, and Rosa says maternal uncle and mother. And Francis mentions, I thought of Ellen too. Absolutely, those are great.
And Jennifer, you have a hand up?
Yes, I didn't see that. Thank you for noticing that.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I was muted there. Yeah, it was a family member who came out, and I come from a very traditional, very religious family that she felt safe for some reason to tell me, and it was really a beautiful experience, and it helped me understand because it was somebody I knew and I'd known for a long time, and even though I had been raised in this very traditional, conventional way, I was able, thanks to her, to understand it better at a very early time in the late 90s. But I feel really grateful and thankful for that. And it's one of the reasons why I really wanted to participate in this webinar. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Okay, we have a few comments in the chat. I'm going to read them out loud. 12 years old, great niece by Donna. And Debbie is mentioning, I'm excited to be part of this discussion. That's perfect. Welcome again. Liz is saying, I was visiting New York and I talked to a transgender person. She looked like a drag queen and we chatted and had the most wonderful time. That's an excellent experience. Thanks for sharing that, Liz. And Karen also mentions, I learned a lot recently from presentation by LGBTQ and plus community at my workplace as well, from a friend's uncle. Lovely, thank you, Karen. Anybody else would like to share their experience or they heard it from other people?
Books.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great point, Elia. Thank you.
I think Carmen is a new hand up.
Oh, you're awesome. And see those heads up, pick you.
Hey, yeah, no problem.
I'm just checking the
That's
chat.
okay.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm just going to say one thing about myself. I used to be on dialysis, so I had a dialysis nurse. And he is a gay man. And he is the first person that explained to me like the spectrum, you know, it's not just homosexual and heterosexual, which for me was something new because like the person before me mentioned, I come from a very traditional upbringing. So I had seen and I was familiar with people that identified as homosexual, but the whole idea of having a spectrum, that was the first time. And I was an adult at that point. That was in 2001. So that was, I think, the first time I was actually opening, not because I was biased, but just it's the first time I had heard about it.
Thank you, Carmen. That was a great experience that you shared with us. That, you know, opens up different view for other people as well. Anybody else?
Before we move on to the next question, I just want to say that the reason I asked this question is because it shows something really interesting that for a lot of us, a lot of the answers that we had, they're kind of fall into two categories. The media, right? We heard books, TV, a couple of us thought about Ellen DeGeneres, or someone we know, someone close to us, right? And so unfortunately, the media does a pretty terrible job of representing queer and transgender folks or sexual and gender diverse people, right? That trans folks are often the butt of the joke, even like the TV show Friends. Lots of people love the TV show Friends. I love the TV show Friends, but they made fun of like Chandler's dad the whole time, right? That Chandler's dad wears a dress and whatever. And that was on TV like not that long ago in a very widely accepted TV show, just as an example. And just bringing that present to say that we all definitely probably have picked up some bias in that regards too. And that doesn't make you a bad person. And forgive me, I lost your name already, but you said, well, I'm not, you know, I don't have a bias. I just never thought about it. And yeah, that's the case for a lot of us too, is that if you're not someone who's part of the community, you probably have never had to think about a lot of this stuff. And that doesn't make you a bad person. So that's why I wanted to start with that question. And thank you all for sharing that.
That's awesome. Thanks for the clarification. That's wonderful. We have one more comment. I'm going to read that. I learned a lot when I worked as an administrator with the student government at Queen's University. Thanks, Maria. And we have Jennifer hands up, but I'm not too sure if it was previously or something recent. Jennifer, would you like to add something before we move on?
No, sorry, I just forgot to lower my hand.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I just didn't want it to miss you just in case. Okay, can we move on, please?
Yes. So thank you, everybody. Nice discussion. So let's move on to our next question. Why is sexual and gender diversity important to talk about? As Celeste already mentioned, that media did a terrible job. So why it is important to talk about? Over to you, Celeste, first.
so much. A couple of reasons, well, not a couple, lots of reasons, more reasons than we have time to talk about, actually. But a couple that I think of right away is that there are sexual and gender diverse people everywhere you go. It doesn't, nobody, chooses to be part of the community. Nobody chooses to be attracted to certain folks. Nobody chooses what their gender identity is. Nobody chooses to feel gender dysphoria or any of those pieces. And so there are sexual and gender diverse folks everywhere, in every walk of life. Everyone, wherever, at schools, we know this, wherever you go in life, you will encounter sexual and gender diverse people. I want to be silly and say, we're everywhere, because we're everywhere. And that's why it's important to have some understanding and even just some basic generic. You don't need a ton to be a good person and to be respectable. Is one thing. The other thing is that we kind of have some, as much as we need to learn, we have some unlearning to do. We have some unpacking of, like we said, biases and negative things that we've maybe been taught. I was raised Roman Catholic. I learned the word gay, and the next thing I learned was, and those people go to hell. Like I was right, that was not a good experience. I was very much taught negative. And so we have some good information to put in place for that instead. And so that's one reason why it's important. Like I said, is we're everywhere is one reason. There's a lot of unlearning we need to do is another reason. And that, negative beliefs and thought systems that folks have really is harmful. And especially for teachers, for folks that are, involved in other folks' lives, especially young folks' lives, you have such an opportunity to make a good impact in the lives of really everyone that you encounter, but especially in the lives of sexual and gender diverse people, just by being a safe and affirming person for them to get to work with. We know there are studies that show that, LGBTQ plus youth are 2 to 3 times more likely to have a suicide attempt than their not LGBTQ plus peers. Another study found that 47% of trans folks ages 16 to 24, so like high school, early adulthood, had considered it in the past year, and 19% of trans folks ages 16 to 24 had actually attempted it in the past year. And that's just in Ontario. And so again, we have a lot of undoing and unlearning to do, because unfortunately these systems that create these negative feelings and biases lead to discrimination, oppression, harassment, rejection from all different walks of life. And so again, we have opportunities to undo some of that. And so I will say at this point again, thank you for spending your time with me and with us tonight, and for having me.
Well, thank you, Clarissa. That was a great points that you made there. It's definitely an important topic to explore and share ideas and unpack things. What we learned was not right. Absolutely great point. Now is your turn, dear audience. If you like, please raise your hand or kindly unmute yourself and say whatever you would like to add. Or you can write your question in the chat or your comment in the chat. I will try my best to read out loud. We already have one comment from Mitra. This is part of our teaching and learning practice in multicultural and diverse setting. We need to know about this spectrum. Definitely, Mitra. Absolutely, 100% agree for that. Anybody else would like to add? Everything starts with education, right? I think we have a lot to say about this. And Debbie is mentioning it is very important to know about the students we teach. Yes, for in our classroom, we will be a diverse setting of students from different backgrounds. Absolutely, very good point. And Francis also mentioned to support those who are being bullied, especially in schools. Yes. Wow, great comments are coming. Please keep typing. So Rosa mentions, I think we all have a lot to learn about the ways that gender stereotyping and training has impacted all of us, regardless of how we identify. These days, learning a lot about non-binary identities from my child who identifies this way. Also, though, presents challenges for speaking about my family with ESL learners. That's great. Thank you for sharing that valuable experience with us. And another one from Irena. I am unlearning a lot. Same here, but I still get it wrong sometimes. Don't feel bad, I'm here with you. For example, I will use a wrong pronoun. What is the best approach to correct oneself when this error is made? Yes, that's a great question.
Pronouns in a couple of questions. So hold that
Oh,
thought.
perfect.
If I don't answer it, call me out. Be like, Celeste, we're going to talk about that.
That's great. So I'm going to move on reading this. Liz mentions, I want to make all the students feel welcome. Absolutely. Whether they are straight or non-straight. Also, I want to support my daughter. Rosa Maria mentions, when we talk about it, we make students feel included and understood. Absolutely. And Shazna, learners come from diverse backgrounds. It is our job as educators to ensure our students are secure and comfortable, also motivated to learn Canadian culture. For sure, for sure. So we have to create that environment in our classes or in our conversations. Anybody else? These are wonderful comments. Thank you so much, everybody, for contributing. This is great, very eye-opening. Christina, I am also learning and unlearning and want to be able to teach confidently my young children about all diversity as they grow. Absolutely, Christina, that's a great point, for sure. Yes, learning and unlearning is the most difficult part, right? But we can do it. Anybody else? These are awesome comments. Thank you, everybody.
Somebody asked for classroom resources in the chat too. So I just pulled up 2 links right now. So there's some for you if you want to look.
Awesome.
And if you want more after today, my contact info is at the end, and I'm happy to connect to offer you more classroom resources after today too.
That's great. Thank you so much for those excellent resources. Perfect. Everybody loves resources. Okay. Anybody else would like to comment on anything or speak up, either through chat or unmute yourself or raise your hand, whatever you feel comfortable with. Otherwise, we're going to move on. Okay.
Maybe you're typing a last second thought, but I'll just say a lot of folks mentioned about like learning, unlearning, making mistakes, and I'll just comment quickly like it's always, in my opinion, you might find people who disagree, but generally I would say you are better off committing to making a difference, committing to learning and changing your ways and making the occasional mistake than you are to say, I don't get it, that's too hard, never do anything, never make any progress, right? Progress with a couple mistakes thrown in is way better than no progress at all. And I like to think that any mistake made with good intention should only be an explanation away from being okay again, right? So yeah, it can get really messy really fast, but if your intentions are in the right place, you want to do it, then that's great.
Absolutely, that's a great point. Okay, I think we're good. We'll move over to you again for the third question.
Right. So our last introductory question, I guess. What is gender identity? I know it's a small question, but incorporates a lot of answer in it. So identity is a complicated area nowadays. So over to you, Celeste. What is gender identity?
Sure, thanks. I give lots of education presentations in general, but especially to classrooms. And when I go to classrooms, when I ask the kids, I say, what is gender? And they all just go blank. And I say, I promise that is the hardest question I'm going to ask you today, because it actually is like really hard to define. And so if we break it up, sometimes that helps. So let's skip gender for a second and talk about identity, right? Everyone I think can understand identity. It's what makes you you. right? And so when we talk about gender identity, it's what makes you you, but in regards to gender. And the reason gender is so hard to define is because it's a social construct, right? You can't see gender, you can't touch gender with your hands, you can't smell it, you can't taste it. It doesn't tangibly exist, but it exists, right? It's a little philosophical, I guess, but yeah, gender it's something that we've decided, I guess, as a society is a thing, that that we have genders, there is gender, and folks have ones that they identify with, and there are limitless terms that people use to identify their genders. Most commonly, right, are male, female, or man, woman, boy, girl, and those fit what society has kind of created and what we call the gender binary, right? That there are only two genders, that you go to the public bathroom, you go to the left or you go to the right. You go to the clothing store, you go to this section or you go to that section. Our society in Canada, anyways, in North America, is very much set up this way, that it's this or it's this. And what we need to talk more about, and what I'm already hearing in the chat, which is great, is that there are lots of people whose identities don't fit that rigid left or right, this or that. There's lots of people who exist and live between the binary, beyond the binary, and so it goes. So that's probably also the hardest question we're going to talk about. Gender identity is very expansive. There are lots of terms that people can use to define their gender: male, female, non-binary, genderqueer, agender, gender fluid, etc. We can make up new ones right now if we wanted. There's no rules about them. And what's important to know is that humans are more magical and complicated and diverse than any textbook definitions will ever let us be. And so that's why there are so many, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that, detailed explanation about identity, because I think all of us, including myself, we needed to know, it's very broad. We can add many things to it. So now floor is yours. Please, audience, put either in chat or raise your hand or unmute yourself. I'm going to read some comments in the chat. Liz says, in Holland, you go to the bathroom that is free.
That's great. I've been to meetings, places, and people, so I'm non-binary, and people have been like, Celeste, I don't know how to ask you this, like, what bathroom do you want to use? And I'm like, if it has a toilet and a door that locks, that's the bathroom I want to use. Like, I don't care otherwise. Carry on, sorry.
No, I think, you made a great point. Again, I need to learn and unlearn things that is not right. And for myself, even like when I go to the washroom, to me, whichever is available, I will go. It's fine. There is a door. I lock my door. Here it is, clear to use.
Right.
But unfortunately, we being affected psychologically when we go to the bathroom and we look for the sign, we look for the writing, or we look for the image to get in. And if we get in, we feel shame. Like one time I was like, oh, I'm in the wrong spot. U-turn, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Okay, Gordon mentions binary gender is even encoded into our SIN and driver's license. Yes, that's a sad one, eh? How do you get rid of that? And we have a few more comments. It keeps going up. Okay. Rosa mentioned, I have loved learning about how in different cultures and at different times in human history, there have been different ideas about gender identity that go way beyond the male and female binary. Wow, that's a good one. Thank you, Rosa, for sharing that. Donna, she mentions, how far have school boards in Canada come in making washrooms for everyone? That's a really good question. Yeah, how far did we come with this, right? And yeah, that's a good question to ask for sure.
The school board's policies are, there is a safe and accessible washroom for every student, and they figure it out without doing giant plumbing renovations. They figure it out.
Yeah. And Patty mentions, I'm here to learn all the different terms that are used about all the different identities and to understand what they mean. Will that be talked about tonight, or is there something you can give us?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I often don't focus on all the terms because, like I said, humans are more magical and complicated than definitions will ever let us be. You don't have to, it's never our job to go, okay, so you look like this and you sound like this and you say you have a wife, so you must be a lesbian, or like, we don't have to do that. I call that like gender sexuality math, where we try to figure out other people. And we actually never ever have to do that. And I hope that's a relief. I hope you're like, oh, good, I don't need to memorize all the terms. And we're going to talk about inclusion and safety in other ways. But I know that some people are like, no, but I really still want to know, or I really want the base understanding still. And so here's a link to a glossary in the chat if you would like. That's my favorite glossary. And even when you open it, the disclaimer right away says it is important to acknowledge that due to the evolving nature of language, personal meanings attributed by groups and individuals, that these definitions are not rigid, that they are mutable and ever-changing, much like the community itself. So there is a list for you if you would really like it, but otherwise,
that's awesome. That's awesome. I think it's for some people, I guess it's very important to know those terms, and whereas others is just to understand. And for Patty, Francis has a question. How common is it for you to have to deal with facing only options of female or male only, in person or in forums? Does it ever get uncomfortable trying to deal with those who are somewhat unaware?
Yeah, it's a daily thing. As a non-binary person living in a binary world, right? I can't escape it. I have a very strong bladder. I'm thankful for it. I avoid gendered bathrooms at all costs. Forms, yep. I've even I try to question it, and to me it's just funny at this point, like, and that's taken work, right? Like, this is the work I do, and I can laugh at this and go, this is a problem with society and not a problem with me. And I've accepted that. Like, I'm okay, I'm Celeste, I'm happy, this is what makes me happy. Society just has some catching up to do, and that's okay. I was getting custom orthotics done, and I had to fill out a form, and it was like gender, and I was like, an M or F. And I said, I'm going to put my foot in a mold, right? Like, these are custom to me. It doesn't matter what my gender is. They're like, yeah. So why do you ask that? Right? Like, yeah, it's a constant thing, and it's, like I said, it's laughable and fun to me at this point. But I manage. Yeah.
Thank you for the explanation. Do you have any other question or any other comments that would like to add on the chats, or mute yourself and talk to us? Give a few more seconds. If not, then we move on to following question. But thank you so much for all the wonderful comments. They are all valuable to everybody in here, because we are all really learning from each other with the help of expert, right? Clarifying things. Anybody else? Okay, we have one more question before we move on. Donna is asking, why are more young people changing their names? That's a good question, Donna.
Yeah, it's a very good question. So people now are growing up in a world, young people now are growing up in a world that's way different than the world that any of us adults on this call grew up in. So for example, I told you when I was a kid or a teen, Ellen got kicked off TV. Like, that's what being a lesbian in the public meant when I was a teenager. Grade, I don't know, 6 or so, 7, preteen, we'll say preteen. Ask a kid today, tell me about Ellen DeGeneres' TV show. They'll say, Ellen has a daytime talk show and tons of people watch it, and she's super funny, and she has a YouTube and a TikTok, and she's all over the internet. And her daytime talk show has won more Emmys than anyone else, and she's retiring because she's got $1 kajillion because she's so successful. I'm like, I'm not that much older than those kids, and we're having such a different experience of acceptance. another example too is, and something I think that's interesting is if we think about like the history of left-handedness, that back in the day, you weren't allowed to be left-handed. If you were in school and you tried to write with your left hand got tied behind your back. It wasn't a thing. You were forced to learn how to use your right hand. And what happened eventually, when we stopped telling people they had to tie their left hands behind their back, there was a sudden increase in the population of left-handed people, which is ridiculous. It's the same number of left-handed people. We just stopped telling them they had to tie their hand behind their back, and there was room for there to be left-handed people in the world. And so I think, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think that that's what we're seeing now is that youth, it's safer for them, and they have the terminology and the language to describe what they're feeling at younger and younger ages. And I think that's a good thing. I think that we are going to lose less folks to mental health and less folks to, I'm sure there were countless that, how could we even track the folks that we lost in the 80s and the 90s when they weren't coming out? How could we track the people that we lost? And so I think that now younger folks are living and growing in a world where it's more accepting. Even if you think about same-sex marriage in Canada, same-sex marriage was legalized in 2005 in Canada. So I remember that. That was a big deal. I remember it being on the news and the fights that happened and all this stuff. It's 2022. So kids that are 16, 17, if they were born in Canada or have come to Canada, this is a country where they were just immersed into a world where gay marriage is marriage, right? And so I think that's why more and more, and I know there's lots of complexities about folks moving here from other countries and what their background had taught them or what it was like in their countries. But for the folks that were born in Canada, raised in Canada, it's a very different Canada than the country that I was born and raised in, and that wasn't that long ago. So really good question. I could literally talk about this all night. So if you're like, Celeste, we need to go faster, you just tell me.
Okay, I guess it's time to move on because we have great discussion questions and we would like to explore them all. Over to you, May, please.
All right, thank you so much. So here we end our introductory question. Let's now move on to our discussion questions. I think discussion questions are a little bit more open-ended. Yeah, so already this question came up. What is gender expression? So all those pronouns and everything. What is gender expression? Yeah, over to you, Celeste.
Sure, yeah. So when we talk about gender identity, something that's important to know is that gender identity lives between our ears. It lives in your head. It's something you know about yourself. Or in young people's cases, it might be something they're questioning about themselves. But that activity of knowing, whether you're male, female, non-binary, whatever your gender identity is, that's something that you know in your head. And so gender identity is internal. Like I said, it's not visible. You can't smell it, you can't touch it, you can't taste it. Gender expression is external. Gender expression is how we show the world who we are. It's how we show the world what makes us unique. What's interesting is when I go into classrooms, I go into one of the school boards locally, the kids all wear uniforms. And so I walk into a classroom and all 20 something of those kids had the same choice of 5 things to wear that day. And they all look totally different. They all have different hairstyles. They have different running shoes. They have a different water bottle, face mask, pencil case, right? These are the things that we show to the world that make us unique and how we express our gender outwardly. Somebody was talking in the chat about different cultures. That's a really cool thing too, that different cultures express themselves in different ways. The thing that's also important to talk about in regards to gender expression is gender stereotypes, because that's a slippery slope really fast, right? That we can't assume someone's gender based on how they look. So we can't pick up someone's gender expression and say, this must be your gender. Gender expression is for us to deliver for ourselves and not for the world to interpret. If that makes sense.
Thank you very much, Celeste. So over to you, audience. Anybody would like to comment in the chat or would like to talk about it? Please either raise yourself or unmute yourself kindly. I think we kind of did talk about this a little bit. So
yeah, it's a little related.
Yeah, sure. So we'll just wait another minute or so if anybody would like to add. If it's not, we can move on. Anybody? Francis mentions, I never considered the concept at all. Yeah, for sure. Some people don't, some people do. We're all different, right? A little bit of everything.
I would like to make one point that I was, talking to Celeste before coming
Sure.
to, yeah. So regarding the expression, like, in some societies, there are some bisexual or some, homosexual people or gender binary people, but they live in such kind of condition, they don't feel like expressing, like society does not allow them to express. But Canada is a country where society allows us to express whatever so if someone is, I'm very sure, like different part of the corner of the different part of the world today, so many people are gender binary, but they are intimidated by the law and everything in the society. They don't express. So it's important to have the right to express whatever I feel. Like, my biological identity is one thing, maybe my cultural identity is different, right? Then, and if my biological identity is one thing, but my cultural identity, I feel a cross connection, like I'm born as a man, but I feel attached to women thing, right? Maybe I love to how they dress, how they look, how they talk. So whenever this kind of mismatch, in many societies, they have different kind of discord. So I think, yeah, it's an issue. We need to express whatever we feel. We should create such kind of, society or situation where we feel comfortable to express ourselves, what I am actually is.
Great, thank you, Ume. We have a quick question, Kevin. How are the schools protecting gender expression from negative responses? That's a very good question. I don't know if there's any policies. Would you like, Leslie, over to you?
Yeah, there should be policies. The schools that I work with, definitely I think they do. It's a good question, but it's considered bullying, right? If youth are being made fun of for their gender, that's considered bullying. And it's actually it's in the Canadian Human Rights Code, in the Criminal Code, in 2017. Bill C-16 was added, which adds gender identity and gender expression to the list of prohibited grounds of discrimination in Canada. So you can't get fired from your job because you're transgender. We know it still happens, unfortunately, but you shouldn't. But you're protected in the Human Rights Code. You could take it up legally if you had the resources and the energy to do it, right? So they should be protected in schools. It should be considered bullying. But it is, like Janice is saying, unfortunately, repression really is everywhere. Yeah. But thank you for being here and working against repression or oppression.
Thanks, Celeste. So since Patty mentions, I think television is the past have contributed to the stereotypes. Absolutely. So the unlearning of those types of expression like voices, color of clothing, gesturing, etc., need to be addressed. Absolutely. I do feel that it's getting better, but what do you think?
I do think it's getting better. When I go into classrooms, those kids give me so much hope. Because when I'm like, what's a gender stereotype? I'll say, what's a stereotype? And they'll be like, Canadians drink maple syrup and ride a moose. And like, yeah, okay, you know what a stereotype is. This is good. And then I'll say, what's a gender stereotype? And a lot of times they're blank. They have a really hard time coming up with them, which is awesome. And then I tell them, look, when I was a kid, if you were a little girl, you got an easy bake oven if you were lucky. And if you were a little boy, you got Legos and a fire truck or whatever. Like it was very gendered about girls do this, boys do this. And then they started to pick up like, oh, like girls are supposed to have long hair, but that's not true. Girls can have any. I'm like, yes, amazing. They're really good. I've had kids that are like, my mom says boys and girls can do the same things, like the same. And I'm like, yeah, give your mom a high five for me. That's great. So it's getting better, but it also still exists for sure.
Okay, great. I think we are getting very close to our time. So I'm going to quickly read the Rosa's comment, and then move on to the question.
Sure.
Something fairly new to me is the idea that someone can identify as non-binary, but not necessarily always or even ever express their gender identity as in between. In other words, a person who identifies as non-binary might present in a way where they are gendered as male or female by others. This goes back to the Celeste's point about it being important for us all not to assume someone's gender identification. Absolutely. Great comment, Rosa. Thank you. Over to you, Me. Let's move on because we have wonderful questions. We got to go through them.
Right, no problem. Our next question is, how do I use pronouns properly? Yeah, Celeste.
Yeah, great question. And that last comment from Rosa was actually like a really perfect segue into this question because, yeah, like I said, you can't look at someone and just know what their gender is. And that's okay because we don't need to know people's genders. What we do need to know is their pronouns. And so pronouns, we call them personal pronouns, is the definition of a pronoun is a word that substitutes for a noun. So when we're talking about personal pronouns, what we're saying is, what word do I use if I don't use your name? Is what personal pronouns is. So some of you I see have them in your Zoom usernames, which is awesome. So if I said, I can see Francine. So if I said I had a phone call with Francine, and I wanted to use Francine's pronouns instead of Francine's name, I would say I had a phone call with her, right? Because I know that those are the words that Francine uses if I don't use Francine's name. Because as you might notice, it gets really awkward really fast if I say someone's name 1,000 times. Like I saw Francine and then me and Francine went for lunch and then me and Francine went to the movies and after the movies, Francine and I, like just saying she and her, what are you doing? That sounds funny. And so, yeah, so that's what pronouns are. And the way to use them, the important piece, I can hear my dog starting to get restless, so I apologize if she barks. The important thing about pronouns is, like I said, we can't look at people and assume what their genders are. We can't look at people and assume what their pronouns are. And there's no rules about gender and pronouns. So we've been trained to think like boys use he and him, girls use she and her. I guess non-binary people use they and them. And that's sometimes true and sometimes that's not. There's no rules about this is your gender, so this must be your pronoun. Everyone has the right to use whatever pronouns are the best for them. We all use whatever pronouns we like the best. And so the only way to know for sure what someone's pronouns are, because I told you you're not allowed to look at someone and just assume what their pronouns are, is to ask. The only way to know for sure is to ask someone their pronouns. And there are some ways to make this a really easy, natural conversation. So, you know, the first time you meet someone, first time I meet someone, hey, I'm Celeste, I use they, them pronouns. Or in my Zoom chat right away. It's in my email signature. When I'm wearing my lanyard at work, I have a name tag and a button that says they, them right under it. And so there are lots of ways to show our pronouns and communicate our pronouns so that we know that we're addressing people properly. The other thing that's important to know too is that you might be someone who, and I'll just keep picking on Francine. Francine might be like, my name's Francine, and that's like a woman's name, and my pronouns are she, her, and I have like kind of long hair, so why would I tell people my pronouns? Because obviously I use she. And the reason is that number one, it's not always obvious. We shouldn't make other people assume for us. And number two is that by Francine putting her pronouns out there, that says to people, hey, I know about pronouns and I want to know your pronouns back. And so that's why it's so powerful and important to communicate pronouns. I'll stop talking about them now. Folks have questions.
Thanks, Celeste. That was wonderful. So anybody would like to add what Celeste mentioned earlier? Rosa mentioned, can we ask students write their names on a piece of paper and then ask them to write a pronoun that they identify with next to their names?
Absolutely. I think that's a great activity. I've been in lots of classrooms where we talk about pronouns and the kids all take the name tags off their desk, write their pronouns, and then slap it back on their desk. It is important to talk about, you might have a youth who, or a student who feels safe and comfortable with you and discloses to you and you only, hey, this is my name and these are actually my pronouns. And you need to then be clear with them and say, do you want everyone to know that? Do you want just me to know that? Do you want just this group of people to know that? Who is it safe and okay to know that? So that's an important piece. But I would add that in saying, you know, if you want to do that with name tags and just say, and just, you know, let's all write our name and pronouns on our name tags and know that the whole classroom is going to see what your pronouns are. So make sure they're the pronouns you're comfortable with the whole class calling you, right? That's a great activity. Oh, and I just remembered, somebody asked a question earlier about what do you do if you make a mistake? I think about pronouns, was that what it was? And I was like, make sure you bug me if I don't answer that question. And so the general answer is you don't have to make a big deal about it. If you make a mistake about someone's pronouns, you do have to acknowledge it. You should, because the more you make a mistake and acknowledge it, the less you're going to make a mistake, right? You know, if you're someone who drives, you drive standard, the more times you stall that thing, the less times you stall, right? As an example. So yeah, with pronouns, if you make a mistake, like I said, you being committed to learning and growth and progress and a couple of mistakes sprinkled in is better than no progress. So if you make a mistake about someone's pronouns, you say, oh, sorry, I meant to call you he or whatever the pronoun is. Thanks, and just move on. The only other time is if somebody is very obviously affected by you calling them the wrong pronoun. It might be like the 10,000th time that day they were called the wrong pronoun, or they're already having a bad day. Then you might not just want to go, oh, sorry, and then leave them if they're very upset. So sometimes you might have to go a little deeper and just say, I'm committed to getting this right. Thank you for being patient with me. We're going to get this right together. All those kinds of nice things. But typically you don't have to make a big deal about it.
Thanks, Celeste. That's a great advice for sure, because if you're not really into that kind of thing and you're trying to learn or unlearn what you know, and most likely we will be making some mistakes, right? So those are good strategies. Thank you. We have Uranus. Yeah. I think, do we have any other questions? Oh, Rosa mentioned people learning English don't necessarily know that there are pronoun options beyond she, her, and he, him. And since they and them is usually the third person plural pronoun, using it for a single person is tricky to teach, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, it is tricky to teach because nobody's teaching it. That's the only reason it's tricky, is because we haven't been taught it. They, them pronouns used in a singular context, we actually use them all the time. If I said to you, whoa, my boss just texted me the wildest news, you would say, whoa, what did they say? Because you don't know my boss's pronouns in the sentence that I gave you. Our brain in a split second goes, she, no, he, no, they, and puts it in, even though it's a singular. We're really good at it subconsciously. The problem is when we need to consciously use they, them pronouns, that our brain is like, what? We're just not used to it. It's existed for thousands of years. It's in Shakespeare, it's in Jane Austen, it's in literacy that's been around for a long time, but it's not happening in our English grammar classes. And so it is a bit of a learning curve, but I mean, I'm committed, I'm here for it. But yeah, good question. I think there were a couple more questions, one or two above that one. Did I miss one?
Was it?
Oh yeah, Donna, do young people ever decided to change their pronouns after using one for a while then switching back? Absolutely, and that's okay. People can change their pronouns on a daily. It doesn't matter. It doesn't harm other people. It's fine. And a lot of times youth ask me, like, how do I know what pronouns to use? And I will tell them, it's like shopping for clothes. You have to try them on or else you won't know. So yeah, sometimes you use them for a while and they don't, and that's okay.
That's great. Thank you, Celeste. Anybody else would like to comment or ask any question about the pronouns that it puzzles you? This is the time to ask. Okay, can we please move on?
Yes. So our next, probably the last question of, or maybe second last question. What is attraction? Yes, Celeste, our expert.
Sure. Yeah, this is probably a short answer. I mean, I'm open to your questions. So this is probably, I'll keep my ramble to the shortest. So attraction is who we're attracted to. It's actually kind of complicated to define because it shows up different in all of us, but how we, you just feel a certain way and you can't always put words to it. And maybe you are very poetic and you can't put words to it. But attraction is yeah, who we're attracted to. And I know that's not a fair definition answer because you can't use the word in the answer of the definition, but the reason I asked this question is it's important to talk about a couple of things. And like I said, I'll try to keep it short. Number one is that we don't choose who we're attracted to. None of us do. We don't choose who we're attracted to. Nobody chooses to be gay. Nobody chooses to be a lesbian, whatever the case. The other thing that's important to attraction is that we can be attracted to people in different ways. So who we might be attracted to physically, in a sense of like who you want to be physical with, and who you might be attracted to in a romantic context or an emotional context, can be different. And that's not something that's talked about a lot. We assume that when we're talking about attraction, we're talking about orientations, right? Sexual orientations, romantic orientations, whatever the case. We're very much taught that whatever your sexual orientation is, that is also who you're emotionally attracted to. And for some people, that's true. And for some people, that's not. That's called split orientation model, that these orientations can actually show up different ways in folks. And again, I'll just summarize and say, we're humans, we're part of nature, we're magical, and we're complicated, and that's okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Celeste, for that clarification. You're absolutely right. Attraction changes person to person, the way that they define. So anybody in our audience would like to say anything about that question or might have a question? Anybody? Okay, I guess it will give more time for the next question. Will be going in, and will be extra time for the breakout rooms, which is pretty important. Would you like to move on?
So our next question, probably the last question for discussion session. If you are cisgender and or heterosexual, what are some things you have never had to consider before, but will now consider knowing what you have learned tonight? It's a very interesting question. Yes, over to you, Celeste.
Yeah, so I'm not a cisgender or a heterosexual person, so I won't answer this question, but I will define these words for you because I realize we haven't actually done that. So cisgender means that your gender identity is the same as what was your sex as assigned at birth. So if when you were born, the doctor, whoever delivered you said, congratulations, it's a girl, and you today are a woman, then you are cisgender. Cisgender essentially means not transgender, is what cisgender means. So if you are someone who is cisgender and or heterosexual, which means like straight, right? You're attracted to the opposite, binary opposite gender. And yeah, so let's read that question again. So if you are cisgender, which means not transgender, and heterosexual, what are some things you've never had to consider, but will now consider knowing some of what you've learned, right?
Well, thank you very much, Celeste, for clarification. Those two terms, it was a little confusing, but now it's a bit more clear for our audience to participate. And now floor is yours. If you like, you can type your answer in the chat box or raise your hand or kindly unmute yourself. Actually, for myself, I question sometimes like, yes, I was, I'm born as a girl, but at the same time, how do I 100% make sure about that? Started to question things, started to look into things a little bit more in deep in an educational way as I learn more. And sometimes, believe it or not, when I share with my friends or somebody that I trust with, they say, oh, don't confuse yourself. Now you're learning more. Now you're going to change. They just get worried about that, just even questioning it. So it's like a little weird, but I don't know. I felt that way at one point. Anybody else? Donna mentioned, I will be mindful about pronouns, which we mentioned earlier, something I haven't paid much attention to.
Great. Yeah, if you're someone who just gets called the right pronoun all the time, you probably don't think about, oh, I should probably asking other people what their pronouns are, right? So thanks, Donna. That's a great thing to be mindful of.
Yeah. Yeah. Even sometimes if you're straight female or male and you think that, why do I need to use the pronoun for? You might not even think is necessary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because you consider as normal in society. So Catherine mentioned, how do we help students who may be struggling with attraction and their feelings for other students?
That's a great question. Sometimes I find the struggle is students are very identity oriented, right? And I think about even when I was in high school, it was not to fully compare it, but to kind of compare it, right? There was like different kind of cliques, right? There was like the sport kids, like the jocks or whatever, the smoke pit kids, the music kids, and the the really smart academic kids. And I think there's kind of a lot of pressure to be like, where do I fit in? And so when we look at like gender and sexual orientations, there are so many words that I think kids get really caught up in being like, am I a trans male? Am I a demi boy? Am I gender fluid? Am I non-binary? Am I agender? And they almost have this like existential crisis over what their identity is. And I love to be really clear with youth and say, as long as you're happy, it doesn't really matter. As long as you're happy and taking care of yourself, there may or may not be a word that fits the way you're feeling, and that's okay. And that there can be a lot of pressure to feel like there's a word that fits for you because your peers might have words that fit for them. And it's, when they're on social media, on TikTok, Instagram, Discord, Snapchat, you can have a bio and you can tell people like, pansexual, he, they pronouns. Like youth are talking about this, which is awesome. But like I said, that's a lot of pressure to feel like you have to have it figured out. And so I try to be really clear with youth that you don't have to have it figured out. Like I've said to you all tonight, like you are magical and complicated, and that is okay. Right? And there may or may not be a word that fits for you, and that's all right. And if there is, awesome. And if there's not, we could write a new one if you want, or don't worry about it, right? So and then yeah, as it gets really complicated in regards to like specifically about attraction and feelings for other students, when they're LGBTQ plus, like there's a whole other piece of like, are those feelings going to be reciprocated? Is my best friend going to be like, you don't ever talk to me again because I have feelings for them? They get really complicated fast. So I think just being open and honest about those and just trying to kind of massage some ease into that pressure can help, I hope.
Absolutely. Thank you, Celeste. Those are great points that you made that some of us are not really aware of it, and we are all learning this evening. And I'm just going to read Shazma's comment in here. I will be more careful about gender identity and will include pronouns in my start of the session conference, where goals are to get to know our learners and their needs. Absolutely. I think quite a few of us actually using those gender pronouns already. So which is great. It's a good start, definitely. Anybody else would like to add more in the chat? Oh, Rosa, Don't know if this is the right time to ask, are there sports for LGBTQ plus newcomers with low level of English who might be looking for community? Great question, Rosa. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Over
that's
to
a
you,
good question.
Celeste.
When I think about, I know locally, yes, there's actually, and I've been waiting, I want to put this in the chat. Niagara Folk Arts Multicultural Center. Did I say that right? Yeah, Niagara Folk Arts Multicultural Center. They have a program right now called Bridging Rainbow Borders. And that's what that is, support for LGBTQ plus newcomers. And I just put a link in the chat to an event they're doing tonight, or not tonight, sorry, tomorrow night, called Culture Shock Training for LGBTQ plus newcomers, which is pretty cool and timely. I don't know if you're open to 2 webinars in a row, 2 days in a row of webinars, but it sounds promising. It sounds like it'll be good. And then I think there's also, yeah, like Center for Newcomers. To be honest, I haven't dove into this too much. It's another link, .ca /LGBTQ. And so if you folks, have more questions about specific resources, if you're looking for resources in your area of Ontario, I just happen to be in Niagara, but if you're not in Niagara, reach out to me and I will still help you find resources or help you connect to someone similar to me in your neck of the woods, wherever you're at in the province.
Thank you, Celeste. That was wonderful. And thank you for sharing those valuable resources with us. I'm pretty sure, we're all going to explore. Any other comments before we move on? Over to you, Mme.
Oh, I think Carmen's hands up. Do you see that?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Carmen, would you
Sorry.
like to?
Hi, I'm in Toronto, and if it's okay with you, I could share a link because my organization does have a group specifically for newcomers. So I'll just put it in the chat.
Thanks, Carmen.
Thank you, Carmen.
And I know Celeste provided us with some teaching material, but if it's okay for me is it okay to comment on current link material or no?
I guess Celeste will get the decision.
Because I'm wondering if there's someone here from TESL that could kind of advocate on behalf of us, because now that I'm teaching, and I was reading through some parts of, the old binders that have the link classroom resources, and I found this one, which was supposed to be about winter and then inviting people to your home, and it's very like the social roles. Like it said, usually the wife does the inviting when there is a social gathering, and I'm like, whoa. And then there was a part where there was a listening, and it said, listen to the thing, and there was 3 questions, and there's 3 listenings, and the third question for each listening said, what is the gender of the person speaking? And I'm like, what?
Oh, that should be a trick question.
I'm like, and that's why I think what Celeste provided is obviously extremely useful, but also just as the TESL community being aware that the material doesn't just have to be about gender identity to be gender correct. Like the material in general, like all the material should look at this aspect as well.
So just since I also teach in adult school, so which level are you mentioning, like in curriculum guide?
That was level 4, and I can tell you exactly what lesson it is because I didn't use it.
Or ESL?
The link classroom resources.
Oh,
it's those old big binders that were put out by
different
CDSB.
CDSB,
yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for mentioning.
No, that was the first thing I thought of when I saw this seminar, because I thought it's really important, right? What is the point of us learning and teaching pronouns and teaching people that there's different identities if then we're using lessons that totally don't reflect that.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you so much, Carmen, for sharing.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Carmen, for those points. Anybody else have any other question before we move on? All right, Ime,
Yeah.
over to you. I think I'm just gonna read one comment in there, or we can use, Carol says, or we can use those lessons as a starting point for discussion. I think that's a good point. And
Not to do.
David mentions to have a welcoming environment, we need to ensure that our learning materials include everyone. Absolutely, for sure.
Sorry, before we go to the next question, Susan has a hand up.
Okay.
Well, I was just going to say the same thing, that if the students have a level where they could actually have a critical discussion, you could totally use that to kind of say, like, what is the problem with this material? It could actually be fabulous.
Good point.
Yeah, that's a good one for sure.
All right. So now it's time for breakout room question.
Perfect.
Gunul, are you ready with breakout rooms?
Yes, I am. If you don't mind explaining, and then we'll start.
Okay, so now Gunul will open breakout rooms. As usual, we do 3 or 4 participants together. And we have a question. We have some time, like 5 to 7 minutes, to discuss this particular question. What can we be doing to foster greater inclusivity and sexually and gender diverse individuals? So this is our breakout room question. So when breakout room request pops up on your screen, you join and discuss this question. And after a few minutes, Gonol will take up, your answers or your discussion, your takeaways from discussion. One person from each group one or two persons from each group will share their ideas.
Perfect. Thank you,
I
Amit.
just-
So
I
I'm
just
open
typo
up.
in the question. Sorry, I put it in the chat. It
Sure.
should say, what can we be doing to foster greater inclusivity of sexually and gender diverse individuals?
Yeah.
So if that's confusing, but I put it in the chat. So read it from the chat.
Okay.
That's my fault. I sent it. Yeah. Sorry, my fault.
No, it's all good. Thank you for the clarifications, Leslie. It's better to explain before they go in the blackout room so that it's clear to everybody. So I'm going to read out loud one more time. What can we be doing to foster greater inclusivity of sexually and gender diverse individuals? So I will be opening up all the rooms. You will get an invitation. Please accept and go to your session and start talking about it. Exchange some ideas about these questions. And then we'll see you in 5 to 7 minutes. Have fun. This is the best part about the dialogue. So we have total of 5 rooms. So room 1. Any volunteers from room 1 would like to share? I can read out loud the question as a reminder. What can we be doing to foster greater inclusive sexually and gender diverse individuals? So that was the breakout room questions as a reminder. So room 1, I know who are in room 1. So please start somebody as a volunteer.
I can't remember the name of the room we were in. I'm so sorry.
Oh, don't worry, room 1. So actually I should have said, but what's your name? I will tell you which room you're in.
Jennifer Pouliot.
Okay. Yeah, you are room 3. Thank you for the volunteering. I was expecting somebody from room 1, but that's totally fine. We'll start with you, Jennifer.
No problem. Well, I mean, it's a difficult topic, and I think there are 2 of us that had some different experiences, and I I think for me, it was a question of having a very diverse classroom experience with students from very different backgrounds and belief systems. And so the only experience I've ever had trying to address the topic, there was a real divergence amongst the students. So I was trying to kind of maybe brainstorm some ideas. I really, I guess, was more or less stuck at the idea that it was difficult and I wasn't able to really bridge the gap between some students who are really open to discussing this kind of topic and really open to diversity and everything that encompasses, and who are very comfortable. And then other students who are on the complete other end of the spectrum. And of course, they're all in your class with different language abilities. It was a linked class. So I can't say I have any great insight to say we successfully discussed it, other than like it created, I won't lie, like create a really tense environment. And it took a couple of days to bring it all back down. And I you know, with the help of the students, was able to get it to just agree to disagree, if I can put it that way. And it felt really inadequate. So if anybody's got some insights out there, like, because some people's beliefs are very, they get really intense, right? And they are, how can I put it? Not able to get past that, and they can't seem to accept, in some cases, other students, and it created a lot of tension. Like it was a real Pandora's box, I guess. Anyway, that's all I had to say.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. You actually explained it quite well. It makes great sense. No, thank you. We appreciate that. In room 1, we also have Laura, Mauli, Rosetta, and Cher. If anybody would like to add what Jennifer mentioned earlier, that was great. Thank you for that, Jennifer. And we'll give you a second. If it's not, I am gonna go to room 1. Anyone in room 3 would like to add? I just want to make sure everybody get it.
It just went back down. Susan, did you want to say? I don't think it's okay, whatever room you're in. But
yeah, no, it's just like because Jennifer was talking about in room 3. So I told whoever she discussed with her own group, I thought would be a great idea to give another person a chance. Otherwise, it doesn't matter.
Oh, no, totally. It just, Jennifer had asked if anyone had something to say, but to be honest, I forgot what room number I'm in also. So I'll just wait for my room.
Actually, it's room 1. So we have Christina, Donna, Janice, Karim, Maria, and Rosa. So anybody in those rooms would like to add anything? So we have, room 1, we have a chat.
Hi. Sorry,
Hi.
this is Shazma. This is Shazma. Hi. So we were in room 5.
Okay.
Room 5, and we have great discussion. We learned about the grammar points, how our learners are. Actually, Susan Barak, you made the point, right? How our students are fond of grammar, and they want to learn grammar and grammar and grammar. So it's a good start to introduce the pronouns. And we really loved the idea that she mentioned there. And then we have Cecilia, who is an employment counselor, and she mentioned that how she prepares them for Canadian environment, right? We don't only have one gender in our country. So when you are going to be in the real world environment, you have to be mindful of your expressions. When you see somebody you find, different, or maybe you have never seen something new for you, you have to be, understanding. And the word the phrase she uses, the knowledge is power. So being educators, it's our job to educate our students to get ready for this real world where they are going to be with everybody. So this is our culture, and it's not new for anybody, right? Maybe it's not acceptable in your countries, but right, it is respectful to be, mindful and educate yourself for, any situation that is new for you. Also, we have Susan, who said that I would use some, visual aids, I will bring mustache or beard and I would say, I want to be called a man. This is my choice. I can change my appearance, and that's how I want to be. And that's who I want to be, maybe. I think that's what we did. We had great discussions in our group.
Awesome. Very
not-
happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm not sure who said that, but also even from the beginning, the discussion on pronouns, like from the very beginning of the class, when you're first taking attendance and you're checking how you're pronouncing someone's name, you can also right then ask what they're, about their pronouns. So from the very beginning, when you're establishing housekeeping, again, I think another group put in the chat about the importance of human rights. I always include that, right? Soliciting the housekeeping rules, that should be done through the class, it should come from the class, but you have to make sure that things are touched on with the Human Rights Code, because they are in Canada and this is the law, and it really doesn't, at a certain point, everybody's entitled to their opinions, but we are governed by the rule of law, and they're going to be, whether it's an educational environment, whether it's a work environment, they have to respect the respect the culture. So it's just part of our job, not only teaching the language, but we're orienting them to their new country. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Susan and Shazma. Those are great points from room 5. So we have 2 rooms left. Room 2, we have Carmen, Carol, Debbie, Liz, and Pamela. If anybody would like to share what happened in that room with us, that will be wonderful. And at the meantime, when room 2 is deciding, I'm going to read room 1's comment. Perform a materials review for inclusivity, open space for safe sharing and discussion, providing definitions and discussing human rights, normalizing discussions, to name a few. Those are great points from room 1. Anybody from room 2?
Maybe that was my room. I have no idea.
Okay.
It's Pam.
I think
Okay. We also like the idea that came up earlier about just starting out with using pronouns, right? Putting that out there, getting to know your students' pronouns, having them, just talk using those, identify those for themselves. Using real world materials. So not all of this link stuff that might be a little outdated, but I mean, now there is so much commercials. Everything shows different, just diversity, right? Different family configurations, so just to be using materials like that when we're teaching our students, just to normalize it. I mean, it doesn't need to be, I don't think, a whole separate discussion. If we can just show that this is the way Canada thinks, this is the way our culture is. And I mean, I think there is some concern about not all of our students will be in the same mind space. And there may be some of those really awkward discussions. And I guess, I'm a little concerned about how that might come up in class as well. But that this is Canada and this is our cultural identity, I guess. And you learn about culture as you learn about the language. We also suggested having some guest speakers that reflect the gender diversity and stuff like that. Even if it's not, it could be a guest speaker speaking about gender diversity, but it could just be gender diverse people speaking on any subject. Again, just this is the view of Canada. These are the people of Canada. So I don't know if anybody else from our group has anything else to add. I don't know if I captured most of it.
I think you covered quite a bit, Pamela. Thank you so much. You made a very good summary. And I love the idea of guest speaker. I think that it's something quite important too. After giving a basic knowledge and inviting someone to talk about it, somebody talking outside, it's not a teacher, somebody else coming into the classroom and talking changes the atmosphere, what they see. So I like that idea. Thank you so much. So we have one group left. I know we are running a little over the time. Please bear with us. I want to give a chance to room 4. We have Donna, Francine, Jem, Kathleen, and Khalid Ahmed. If you would like to share what did you discuss in that group, that would be wonderful. And then we'll close off. You're muted, Francis.
I'm going to start talking, but I'm going to put Donna on notice that I'd like her to talk after me because her point is the most relevant. In my situation, I'm not teaching right now, and I'm involved with a group of seniors, and I'm trying to encourage the use or the mention even of pronouns, and I'm getting a lot of resistance. It's almost like, let's just ignore it, Francine. You're too ahead of the curve. You're too progressive, blah, blah, blah. And I find it frustrating. And of course, the more they push me, the more I push. So that's my point. I'm going to sidetrack to do a commercial. I'm also part of the volunteer team on TESL Ontario. And we have, do I pronounce your name as Celeste or Celeste?
Yeah.
Okay. She is.
my mom would call me Celeste, and my Nona would call me Jealous. So it doesn't really.
Okay, well, Celeste will be joining us again for a TESL Ontario webinar later this year. I can't remember which month. I'm sorry. Do you remember?
It's in my calendar though. So
yeah, me too.
My calendar will tell me to be there.
Anyway, she will be joining us again for a webinar. So please, if I'm sure this is just a taste of the topic. And so please come back and join us. And Donna, will you please unmute yourself?
And it's Laura just jumping in. It's May 18th.
Oh, thank you, Laura.
Celeste will be joining us. Thank you.
Okay. So Donna, thank you.
Well, it's fine. I'm glad to contribute, but I thought it was it Kathleen Saunders who was with us, and she had the point. I know what her point.
You up. Sorry.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
Okay, Kathleen, come on in, please. No, she's too
what do you want me to say?
Just to bring you to explain your points about the extent that you've been able to address it or not in your classroom.
Well, no, I think some of those other people were saying that I was just saying to my group that I tried to introduce the idea of same-sex marriages and that's the law and that everyone has that freedom, and you may not necessarily agree with it, but this is, you're in Canada. I think it's what was already said, but I met a lot of resistance. They didn't want to discuss this. They wanted to change the topic. And my question actually, listening to some of the other groups, is that at what level are you introducing all of this in terms of, can somebody comment on that? Like, what level are you teaching when you're introducing all of this? Because I teach a 2-3, and I'm not sure what other people are teaching to introduce this concept. These. Can somebody speak to that?
I have introduced it to level 7.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Like so I find for a 2-3, is anyone doing this topic in the 2-3 classroom?
Yes, we have Liz mentions 2-3 as well, and Rosa mentions 3-4.
Just for Celeste to know, the higher the number, the better there's fluency in English. Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
I've had to introduce it at different levels depending on, whenever you're talking about pronouns, you sometimes even in very lower level, much lower level classes, because the issue sometimes comes up. I've had francophones trying to learn English who don't use the he, she pronouns. So and they're at very basic levels. So I've seen it at all levels whenever pronouns are used.
Okay, we're running a little over our time, so I'm gonna do the closing part, and because I'm pretty sure some would like to finish. So first, we'll start with
Usually everybody puts thank you so much in the chat.
Yes, you are more than welcome to do that. So first we'll say thank you so much for joining us this evening. As audience are also Celeste, thank you so much. So we'll be sharing soon Celeste's contact information, so that if you have any other question you didn't get a chance to ask or it got missed during the chat session.
PD certificates will be emailed to you.
Yes, so PD certificates, we're going to email that to you about 7 days. The email address that you use most likely will come to that. For survey, that's going to be in few business days that will arrive to your email address as well. And we also have an upcoming up session if you're interested. One in March 12th, promote an active reading with online social annotation by charity. And we also have another one, oral corrective feedback, pedagogical implication by Mohammed Fasari. And Umi, would you like to share our presenters' contact information, please? I'm gonna stop sharing what I have. And thank you again, everybody. We had a great discussion session. That was wonderful.
Yeah, so this is her email. It's not her, I'm sorry. This is their Celeste's email and LinkedIn profile. So you can take a picture or write, and if you want to contact with them in future, you are most welcome.
Thank you, Celeste. That was a wonderful discussion session. As earlier Francis mentioned, we'll like to have you again because this topic is huge. You know, sometimes the hour that, even though it's 1 hour and a half, it felt like it wasn't enough. People would like to talk and share more things, which I'm very thankful. Many people participated quite well. We are thankful about that. And maybe we'll do this again. Thank you so much, everybody.